Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Nick Kroll Show. Today, I have Jaines Andrades here with me. She is a doctor now, once a custodian at the same hospital she's now working at. And I came across a picture of hers that went viral one day. She posted all the badges of hers moving up the ranks. And I thought it was so cool. And I knew there was a lot of hard work to that. So I asked her if she would come on the show. And here she is to tell her story. Jaines, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I guess my first question is, did you always have that goal of becoming a doctor?
Absolutely not. No.
Wow.
So I, since I could remember, wanted to be a lawyer. And I would literally I'd be like 8, 9 years old. I'd watch court TV and like have fake trials because I was going to be a criminal defense lawyer. First of all, I had no idea what that meant, but I was gung ho that I was going to be a criminal defense lawyer. And when I was around 17, the reality of becoming a lawyer kind of settled in. And there was no way in my mind at that time that I'd end up going to school for 8 years. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. And I just got like discouraged and I said, forget it. I'm not going to be a lawyer. So then I decided instead, based on a conversation that I had with a nurse, I decided to go the nursing route and then go from being custodian to a nurse. And then I have my doctorate, so that's why I'm a doctor. But I'm a nurse practitioner.
Oh, that's awesome. So you knew I need to get into a hospital. Like that was your goal there. I need to get into a hospital no matter what I'm doing. And that ended up being a custodian job?
Yeah, so I think throughout all of this, I get a lot of credit for like the progression when it kind of like just fell into place. So I worked at Wendy's prior to my custodian job, and when I got accepted into nursing school, I knew like I needed a more consistent job to like support myself through school. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to eventually work in a hospital, so it makes sense to work in a hospital now. And I applied for like everything and anything: custodian, the cafeteria, dietary aid, anything that was entry level. I applied for it, and I got the custodian job. And then that's how it ended up happening.
What gave you that idea of like, I mean, you knew you had to get in a hospital and that was just I'll do anything it takes to get into the hospital. I don't care what I'm doing for now, as long as I can progress.
Yeah. So I think like I've just always had the idea, or I've been really good at understanding like sacrifice now and celebrate later.
Mm,
So like I didn't see an issue with being a custodian because I knew that I was going for more than that. And there was nothing wrong with being a custodian. That's
absolutely
like an
not.
honorable job. But like in my mind, I was totally fine to be a custodian because I knew that it was temporary and I'd have to go through that to be able to get to the next step.
That's so cool. So I actually listened to another podcast. It's by Kent Coleman, and he talks about like it's this thing called the proximity principle of how if you have a goal of where you want to get, you have to do what it takes in the meantime to get there. And he's like, you got to get in and around the people doing what you want to do. And that, I mean, it stuck out the second I saw that picture of you. I was like, wow, she did exactly that. Like he teaches this for a living because it works. And I mean, clearly it works. Like, how did you build relationships as you got in?
I think just over time, just talking to people. So again, like it wasn't this like methodical thing that like I'm like, okay, so now I'm in the hospital and I know I have to talk to all the nurses and I got to talk to all the doctors to be able to build a network. It was like really organic. Like I just, in the locker room as I'm changing, because I worked in the operating rooms. So as I'm changing into my scrubs, the woman next to me, her locker, she happened to be the nursing supervisor. So like at first I would just talk to her about, oh, she'd say, oh, how's the weather outside? And and then little by little, then, you start having conversations and then it's like, oh, well, I'm a nursing student. Oh, really? Well, I'm the nursing supervisor. And then boom, I made that connection, but it wasn't something where I like looked up who did what. I just let it happen organically.
That's awesome. And that I'm a very big, hey, how are you person. And if you make eye contact with me in public, I'm saying, hey, how are you? And especially when it's someone that I've been some place that I go frequently, because you just never know like who that person is. First off, you never know if that's going to make somebody's day better, but you also never know who that person is. Like everybody, I mean, the reason I do this podcast is because I think a lot of people have a lot of cool stories. And the more you say hello to somebody, the conversation becomes, hey, how are you? Good. You? And then the next time it's, hey, how are you? Good. You? Oh, how was your weekend? Oh, it was good. Yours? And it just progresses exactly like how you're saying. And I'm so for all of this so far. This is awesome. So did you, I don't want to say not like, but was the custodian job like from time to time kind of like, oh man, I really wish like this was moving faster? Or were you okay with it?
I think I was okay with it probably until like my senior year, because I was really naive going into nursing school, because again, like my whole life I thought I was going to be a lawyer. So I didn't know anything about the medical field. I wasn't a nurse's aide, none of that. So as I was in school and I learned more about the medical field, then I wanted to do more things, right? So like when I started understanding what the surgeries were and like what the instruments were used for and what the medical jargon meant, then I wanted to be more involved. So I would say like, yeah, towards the end of my nursing school, that's kind of where I was like, okay, let's go. I want, I want to do more.
Yeah, and you kind of have to have that drive to do more, or else you'll just kind of stay in the same spot forever. That's
Right.
awesome. What was like your biggest takeaway from being a custodian at the time? Like, I'm sure you were building great connections. I'm sure you were learning things. I feel like no matter what job you do, there's always something you can learn. Was there something that stuck out to you there?
I think maybe not so much immediately after leaving. I think it was later on. It really taught me like to be humble, right? Because it's like I was at the bottom of the totem pole per se. And as I like moved up, the fact that I was a custodian always kept me grounded and always kept me humble. Like there was no way that I could mistreat someone who was below me, because I knew what that felt like, right? So like I knew what it was like to walk into someone's office and they didn't even like acknowledge my presence. So I make sure that now that like I'm a provider myself, the guy who stops by and he picks up, our trash and everything, I make sure to like say hi to him. I know his name. I ask him how his day is going and acknowledge his presence, because I've been that person who like cleaned someone's office 5 days a week and I didn't even know who they were because they just acted like I was a painting on a wall.
That is an incredible takeaway. I mean, that is so important, and that the world needs more people like that. That's awesome. That made me that made me really happy to hear, because that's true. I think I've definitely been that guy before too, right? The low guy on the totem pole, and you walk into this big wig's office and they just don't even acknowledge you, and you're like, at the end of the day, you're all human. That's the crazy thing, is like, it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. Like you're a human at the end of the day. And it doesn't, like, you can be as high up as you want to be, but we're still people. We all still have feelings. We all still talk. We all still communicate. Like, you don't have to think you're so much better or so much worse than somebody else. Cause at the end of the day, you never know, that guy might be having a bad day too.
Yeah. And I always have a thought of the higher you go, the like harder you fall. But if you're a good person and you help people and you're respectful, as you're falling, there's going to be people to catch you, right? So people are going to remember, oh wow, like that guy who cleans the who takes the trash. You never know, maybe my car could break down, and he's like, oh, that's the nurse practitioner. She's super nice. I know this mechanic. I'll help her out. And in that moment we're equal. In that moment he isn't the custodian and he is the provider. And I always just keep that in mind, like no matter how high you go, you always have the potential to fall, but if you're a good person and you're decent to other people, people will catch you.
And also too, I mean, that's a great point. I've seen that many times where two people will kind of make the same mistake, but the guy that's been kind of more stuck up, a bit more of an asshole, always falls a little bit harder than that guy who's always done his job, who's a really nice guy, really happy, really positive. He usually gets caught a little bit sooner before he hits the ground. The other thing I've seen with that too is like you're you're a nice guy, and then somebody else is like, oh yeah, hey, go to this person. Like for me, I'm thinking of like training, right? Like I like to be obviously very nice to people, and that refers a lot of clients my way too, because like, oh hey, yeah, he's been great. Like go to him, help him out, and then you also can grow a business that way too, just by being a good human being. And
Mm-hmm.
there's like such this stigma of like, oh, he has feelings, like he must be a pussy or whatever you want to call it. It's just
Mm-hmm.
so wrong. It's such a wrong mentality. Like everybody at the end of the day has feelings. It's just, you got to be nice to everybody, because you don't know, sometimes people are going through some hard times.
Right, exactly. And there's strength in showing your feelings, right? So like to suppress how you feel, or like to be mean for the sake of like putting up a front, is a
Mm.
lot weaker than being genuine, right?
And
Because like if you're genuine, then you have to have enough courage to like be yourself, and that takes a lot of strength. So I think that, yeah, just being yourself and being genuine is so much harder than putting up a facade.
yep, that's thank you so much for, you took what I was trying to say and put it exactly how it needed to be said. That was exactly the point I was trying to make there.
Yeah.
Um, another question for you. So you go from a custodian, and then what was the next thing you hopped up to?
Then I became a nurse. So I got my bachelor's degree and I became a nurse.
And what is like, I mean, I kind of know, obviously I've been to a hospital before, but what is a day to day for a nurse?
Yeah. So, okay. I think if I take my jobs, so I want to say it was 4 jobs as a nurse. So my first job, I was in corrections, and I worked at the local jail. So that was kind of like a mix between working in a doctor's office and like the ER. Like if I could put that in like plain terms, we would see the inmates for really routine things, high blood pressure or diabetes, toothache. And then we would see like the emergencies, whether it was a fight or someone fell or something like that. So it was kind of like a mixture of the doctor's office and the emergency room in one.
So
Um,
I'm sorry, I
yeah.
have to jump in there. You were a nurse in a prison,
in a jail.
a jail.
So
Okay.
yep, the difference being that like at least in the jail that I worked in, inmates were sentenced to 2.5 years or less.
Okay. So they were more of like the low level.
Correct. Hmm.
I mean, you must have some pretty crazy stories from that.
Yeah. yeah, definitely. And like, especially because I was 22 at the time, and I worked in the men's jail. So I was a 22-year-old like
Mm.
new nurse in an all men's jail. And even just like the interactions in that way. But it was kind of weird because it's like people always ask me like, were you scared? And I mean, I think at first, of course, like it's intimidating, but then I realized that I'm safer in a jail than I am in a hospital, right? Because like in the jail, there's a a correctional officer next to you the whole time, and you know that this person has committed a crime. So you don't know what the crime is, but
Your guard's up.
you know something.
Mm.
Versus in a hospital, that same person who was in the jail is in the bed, no cuffs, no correctional officer, and you don't know what they've done. So yeah, it was yeah, it was a crazy ride, but I learned a lot.
Yeah,
Um
absolutely.
yeah, and then I worked in substance abuse, um, which gave me a different perspective on substance abuse and like how um, it's, I think, kind of crazy to see addiction from the person who's addicted. I think a lot of times you see it from the perspective of the people that it hurts, and you
Mhm.
don't see it from the perspective of the person going through it. And seeing people struggle to get out of addiction and the battles that they fought gave me a lot of empathy, because it's
Can,
like it's a lot different when the shoe is on your foot, right?
can you dive into that a little more? Like, kind of dissect like what you mean by that?
So I think that sometimes people would say that an addict is selfish, and an addict cares about nothing and they care about no one, and they, like it's your fault you got addicted, and it's a like self-inflicted thing. And I mean, I guess obviously you can make the argument that it's self-inflicted because you didn't like, how to say it, like someone didn't put a knife to your throat to do this drug, but someone doesn't have to put a knife to your throat to convince you to do something when like your life is hard. And like if your parent was a drug addict and that's the example that you were given, that's what you're conditioned to, so you're going to follow in those footsteps. And I think that there's a part of addiction that's very much a choice, and then it's out of your reach, right? So like it gets to a point where it's no longer your choice, it's actually like, you know, been studied, like chemically your body needs this to feel at some kind of baseline. And to see people kind of struggle with the fact that, like, you know, oh my god, I'm losing my children to the court, and I'm trying so hard to do right, but I live right above my drug dealer. People are doing drugs when I'm walking out the stairs, you know, out from the stair, walking down the stairs, excuse me. It just gives you a different perspective that it's not so easy to just say I'm done. If you have the perfect conditions, being you have rehab, you have support, you can take yourself out of the situation completely, then yes, recovery is something that is pretty easy. But for a lot of people, that's not the case. So it's not as cut and dry as just stop the drugs. Because I don't think if you spoke to drug addicts and you like ask them, do they want to be addicted? I don't think anyone wants to say, yeah, pick me. I want to be a crackhead. You know, that's not their thought process, but they get to a point where it's no longer a choice. The choice was years ago. Now it's them physically needing this drug, you know? Yeah, that was a bit long-winded, but
yeah, no. So did you like kind of find them almost confiding in you to like talk about that and like, hey, someone's listening to me? Because you seem like a person that listens really well. So I imagine people kind of lean on that. When you're in a hospital, usually you're not doing well. So they need someone to lean on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a lot of the times they lack stability, like relationships that offer stability. Because like for example, like their mom did drugs, their dad does drugs, their partner does drugs. You know, so there's no one really to give them a example. So you kind of become that example for them. Someone who, you know, because my job is as the nurse isn't to judge them, isn't to put them down, yell at them, scold them. My job is to be there to support them, provide them with medications to get them through the addiction. So yes, you become their consistency.
Oh, that's nice. I'm sure you've had a pretty big effect on a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I've heard.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So you go from the addict center to?
Then I decided to go to school again. And my current degree is in acute care, so that's in inpatient hospital. So then I transitioned to the hospital. I worked on a medical floor, which is like a general, you know, you have pneumonia, you have a skin infection, very general floor. And then I specialized, which was my last job as a nurse, in the heart. Um, and then, so I worked as a nurse until last year in September. And then I started as a nurse practitioner in the trauma team.
So forgive me here. I don't know the difference between a nurse and a nurse practitioner.
Sure. So the best way that I can describe a nurse practitioner is a nurse that can prescribe medications and make diagnoses. So usually like the nurse follows orders, you know, like the doctor will go in and tell you, oh, like you need a shot and you need your blood pressure taken and we need to weigh you. And then the nurse comes in and weighs you and gives you the shot and gives you a medicine. So like a nurse practitioner is a nurse, an advanced practice nurse that's able to write prescriptions and make diagnoses, like a doctor, but without having the medical degree.
Ah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you get to see all sorts of different patients. And what you said you're in the trauma field right now?
Yes.
Oh man, that must get pretty messy.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Like today I worked and our list is incredible. So many people, falls and car accidents, gunshot wounds, stab wounds. Um, we'll get people like chainsaw injuries. Um, an ATV fell on someone. So
All
anything
today?
that people can do to hurt themselves, that's my team.
That's funny. My dad was that chainsaw guy one time. He fell off a ladder. He didn't like cut himself up too bad, but he got
Yeah.
his leg and he fell in poison. It was a disaster.
Oh geez. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Could have been my patient then.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh man. Wow. So you see it all.
Yeah.
Does
Yep.
that wear on you mentally sometimes?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Because again, like you're a medical professional, but you're a human underneath that. And you
Exactly.
can only see so much before it starts to wear on you. Like, people run away from trauma, right? Like there's entire courses on how to get over trauma and avoid trauma. Um, Meaning like psychological or emotional trauma. Um, and in my job as a trauma NP, all of those traumas are mixed together. So you have physical trauma and the mental trauma and the emotional trauma, and you as the provider, you're trying to manage all that.
Mhm.
Along with your own issues, right? Because like it's
You're
not like you
human.
come
You got a
in
life.
like perfect. So yeah, it does wear on you. And then like, it's sad to see. We see 20-year-olds die and 22-year-olds, and then you like see their family and they had young children or they just got married, or so yeah, they can
Yeah.
get mentally draining.
That's gotta be tough. Did you guys have like pr- standard protocols to help like get people through stuff like that that you see? Like, do you guys have what's it called? I've heard the term for it before, like a stand down almost.
So in terms of like helping patients or supporting patients through the traumas, we have social workers who come
Sorry,
in.
I meant like for you guys, like the
Oh, for
nurses,
us.
like
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Sorry. I mean, we have opportunities to debrief. Um,
debrief. That's what I was trying to say.
yeah. With each other, and usually like our attending. So we have. I work in a team. There's me. I'm the only nurse practitioner. We have two physician assistants, and then a ton of residents, which are doctors who are in training, like actual physicians who are training. And then we have the attending surgeon, which is, like they're the boss. And our attendings usually do a good job of asking, like, are you okay? Like, that was a tough one, or having us do a huddle after a traumatic trauma, so that you can debrief.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do you ever something I've seen some things that most people probably haven't before. Have you ever like had to do you find your not maybe not yourself, you seem like a really good person, and I guess you wouldn't be a bad person if you did this, you'd kind of be just normal, but
Mhm.
do you ever see people around you kind of like writing it off almost as a joke, like they had just to cope with it? I feel like I've seen that many times, and it's unfortunate, but that's the almost the best way people know how to cope with it, and I'm just curious if you guys had a different method of that.
Yeah. So yeah, inappropriate jokes, right? So
Yeah.
there'd be things that I'd never repeat that we say,
Yeah.
like making something funny just to be able to deal with it, or minimizing something like, you know, um sometimes it's like, okay, well, a trauma came in, and then it's like, well, oh, they just broke a leg. Oh, that's okay, whatever. Like, not too
Right.
bad. When it's awful, like this person was just in a car accident, it's equally terrifying if you break one leg or if you break both legs, like, but you kind of minimize or desensitize yourself to it so
Mm.
you can deal with it. Because then, like if you felt everything that happened to other people, you couldn't be productive. There's no way that I could do my job if I stopped and thought about how, like, oh my God, how must this person feel? Oh my God, like, oh, like, how are they're a father, and how are they going to provide for their family? Like, I have to just say, like, these are their injuries. this is what I'm going to do to fix them.
That's a good point too, because if you're so worried about like how they're doing, you can't do what you need to do to get them back to being healed or however they were before they came in.
Right. Exactly.
That's yeah. So not to go too far back here, but I wanted to ask you your biggest takeaway from working in a jail like that. I feel like you said you learned some good lessons. If you got more than one, I'd love to hear them.
Um, I think the biggest takeaway that I have from the jail is that more likely than not, people who are in jail are good people who made really bad decisions, not bad people who made bad decisions. Which I thought, it was surprising to me. Like when I worked there, I was like, everyone in here is Charles Manson. Everyone in here is like a serial killer, and everyone in here is an awful person. And then as I like talked to the inmates and got to, got to know them in terms of like, helping them through their medical issues, I realized, holy wow, like he's not a bad person necessarily. He made a really bad choice, but like not that I couldn't see myself in them, but I could get why they did what they did. You know what I mean? Like I could understand, and maybe not empathize, but I could kind of understand where they were coming from. That this person isn't an awful person. Like he has a wife and a daughter and a mother, and just made a really dumb choice of like getting in a car and driving drunk. That's not an awful person. You know what I mean? Like he shouldn't be condemned for that. He just made a really bad choice. So that was the biggest takeaway, that basically like not reading a book or not judging a book by its cover. That's the biggest takeaway.
And you did mention that it wasn't like a maximum security prison too. So you're not dealing with like the worst of the worst in there.
I mean, yes and no, because like those people come through the jail and then they're sentenced. And then once they're sentenced to whatever life, 20 years, then they move on. So it's not like those people who did really awful things. It wasn't like they weren't there. They were, but it was transitional,
Yeah.
Because they would go to trial, get convicted, and then move on to their final destination.
As far as personal development, how do you feel like that helped you going through a jail? I feel like that's a really like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of people don't take that path through the jail.
Right. Personally, like, so personal development, there was a couple of things that I learned. So I think first, again, not judging a book by its cover, by their cover or by the cover. I think also being able to control my own biases, right? So there was certain things, like certain, let's say just like certain crimes that like, if we found out what someone did, it was kind of like, okay. And then there was some that like triggered me. But I still had to give that person adequate care. So I really had to grow as a person to not be like petty and mistreat this person, because at the end of the day, I understood I chose to work in a jail. So I choose to come into this environment. If I didn't want to deal with these type of people, there's thousands of nursing jobs out there. I was the one that got dressed every day to go in there. So once I kind of understood that, it helped me. And I think, it honestly made me be a more honest person. Like have that my word had value, because I think with the inmates, honesty is the best policy, right? And like just I really learned that like if I didn't have to promise the world, and I didn't have to like obviously do anything crazy, but just being honest got me a lot further than being like, yeah, I'll give you that med and then never giving it to them. Like if I was just honest and I said, listen, like this medication that you're requesting is just not going to happen. We're just not going to do it. Yeah, maybe I got a little bit of pushback, but then it was like, okay, well, that nurse is honest and she's going to let me know what it is. So I think for me, that translated kind of like to my life moving forward, to just tell it like it is, because it might cause a little bit of like a ruffling of the feathers in the beginning, but then people trust your word, you know? They
Yeah.
may not like what you say, but then they trust it.
Yep. And then there's always I'm with you 100%. Their honesty is the best policy. And there's always well, down the road, something comes up that wouldn't have been a big deal 10 years ago. But now it's like, this has been 10 years. You've been just building and building and building off this lie. And then one day it comes out and you're like, yeah, about that.
Yeah. And then like in jail, time is condensed so that those 10 years, you could tell the inmate, listen, I'm going to give you this medication at 8 o'clock. Knowing in your mind, you're not going to do it. It's like condensing 10 years in those 5 hours. You know what I mean? Like you don't do that and they remember and then it's over. You know, like you lied to me. This is it. I don't trust you anymore. Leave me alone. So yeah.
And trust, I imagine, is pretty big in a jail. That's
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even like just simply for your safety, right?
Yeah.
So that you can have interactions with your patients that are safe and you don't have to worry, you know, like it's if you're constantly lying and you're constantly manipulating, some of these inmates have nothing to lose, you know, and that always has to be in the back of your head. So just like being honest and being a good human being just helps your shift go so much smoother.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And how many years did you end up doing there?
I did my bid in jail was I think 3 years.
3 years in jail. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then you went to the abuse cycle in the actual hospital
Yep. Mhm.
and did how many years there?
So in substance abuse, I did one, and then in the hospital two.
And then now you've been a nurse practitioner for how long?
Since September.
So it's been, if my math is correct here, 5 or 6 years.
Of a nurse, yes.
So
Yeah.
good things come. It just takes hard work.
Yeah, definitely. And patience.
How long were you a custodian for?
I was a custodian 4 years.
4 years.
Mhm.
Wow.
Mhm.
And do you plan on going even higher? I don't know what comes after nurse practitioner, but
No, no, I don't think so. So I have a doctorate in nursing, so like I can't go any higher academically. I'm done. And then the only thing higher than a nurse practitioner is like a doctor, like a physician, and I'm not going back to school for that. So this is the end of the road for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to that, and I'm sure you see and you grow every single day. You see something new that you interact with so many different people, so many new perspectives, so many new like, how did this happen? You know, you think you've seen it all, and then something else comes, and you're like, well, I learned something new today. What I don't know how much you can tell or how much you want to tell, but what was like the craziest thing you've seen come through a hospital?
Craziest thing I've seen come through a hospital. Um, I don't, honestly and truly, COVID.
Yeah, wow, that's a good one. That's
Honestly,
a good one.
yeah. Because I'm trying to think of like when I was the most shocked or like the most taken aback, and yeah, COVID. I can clearly remember the day that I got my first like COVID. The person didn't end up having COVID, but they had the symptoms, so therefore they were like in precautions because of that until we got the test. And back then, those tests used to take days to come back. The swabs, where now you can get them in 15 minutes. But yeah, that was I got to work and we had designated the COVID rooms. And I like walk in, and the day before I had this certain section, which was at the beginning of the unit. Those were my patients, and then so like when I walked past that certain room and I saw like the COVID things, my like heart dropped, and I was like, oh my god, my life is over. I don't know what to do, And then still being like super scared, but still having to care for the patient and have respect and give them the same quality of care. It was tough, but yeah, that was the craziest. I don't think anything will top that.
Did you guys like, were you working crazy hours through all that? I mean, how was that like on you guys mentally?
Yeah, so it was hard because in that time, so actually like literally probably to the day today, um we changed units. So the hospital moved things around to make more COVID friendly spaces, to make like all COVID patients be in one part of the hospital and non-COVID patients in another part of the hospital. So like all of that was like, it was insane, there was so many changes constantly,
Mm,
constantly, like today you wear a mask, tomorrow you wear this, you today you wear this kind of mask, tomorrow you wear that kind of mask, you need a gown, you don't need a gown, you need goggles, you don't need goggles, there was so many changes all the time in the beginning parts of COVID. It was crazy. And then it was really intense because um you just had to get used to, like, I timed myself once in those early days on how long it took me to put on all the PPE, and as fast as I could put it all on, it took me 50 seconds, which is a long time, especially when a person, like the patient, is decompensating and you have to, like,
mm,
50 seconds turns into an hour, you
yeah.
know? Um,
Seconds matter in a hospital.
yes, you do. And when you had to spend 50 of them putting on all of this equipment, I mean, now I can do it so much faster because I know the order, and I, come up with like tricks to like get it done fast. But in those times we didn't know anything. So it was just nuts. I didn't pick up time as much. But it was just the time that I was there, it was
Nonstop.
in nonstop. Actually, like, it was weird at first. When the lockdowns first happened, it was eerily quiet.
Mm.
Like, and that's not a word we use in the medical field. Quiet is like a bad
Oh
word,
yeah.
but it was eerily quiet. Like, my unit held like 33 patients, and there was a time where there was like 10. um I got sent home early one day, and then, like, all of a sudden, as quickly as it was quiet, it was like a tsunami. And then it was like crazy for months. And now we're kind of, like, coasting because we
Mm.
know so much more than we did.
Right. You're more efficient now. It's not that there's less workload, but you're
Mhm.
much more efficient now.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
That's something I always say. Like I I think I do a lot of different things between this work, business, like all that. And like people are like, how? And I'm like, well, you learn one thing at a time, you get really efficient at it, and then your time goes down. You now have more time to learn the next thing, and you get efficient at it, and your time goes down.
Mhm.
Well, after time, you get everything just kind of becomes like second nature. You're like, oh, okay, okay, okay. And then before you know it, it's like, oh, all right, we're done, you know?
Mhm. Very
Um,
true.
First off, thank you so much for like being a nurse, and especially during these times. I know how crazy that was. I know we were living in a different place, and we had a hospital right across from our house before this, and there was always like balloons and all sorts of, like, thank you nurses stuff, and it was really good to see like the community do that. And I think like you could see them come out, walk to their cars after a long day, and it made a difference. So
Yeah,
thank you
definitely.
specifically for all that. Thank you for being here as well. I don't really have too many more questions for you. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think I'm okay. I think I'm blabbing.
I will ask you this final question though.
Sure.
Knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself 5, 10 years ago?
That's such a good question. I would tell myself, I think, two things. Believe in yourself and calm down. I think, like, enjoy the ride.
Mm,
I went through all of this education and, like, all of these transitions, and really didn't enjoy the experience because I was so focused on getting it done. And
mm,
I wish I could have enjoyed it a little bit more. And I could have. If I would have been patient with myself and believed in myself that I could do it, then some of the pressure would have been taken off and I could have enjoyed it. Um, because yeah, the last 10 years are a blur. I can't tell you, like, I one time, I want to say my niece, I have a niece and she's 9 this year. And I remember that through my education, she was born after the year I became a nurse, she was born. So, no, or the year before. Either way, no, I'm sorry. She was born while I was in nursing school. Sorry. Either way, so she's used to me being in school, blah, blah, blah. So fast forward to when I was in NP school, I'm like, oh my gosh, baby, congratulations. Like, you're a first grader now. And she was like, no, Titi, I'm actually in second grade. You know, like I missed a whole year of her education because I was so focused on getting things done.
Hmm.
So I would have advised myself, like I said, to be kind to myself, believe in myself, and to like chillax and enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride. That's a good
Yeah.
one. I like that. I tend to ask that question if I remember to everybody that comes on, and I don't think I've heard enjoy the ride yet. That's a good
Yeah.
one. It's
Yeah,
very true.
definitely. Because you can't get that time back. And like hard work is good and discipline is good, but it's kind of like when you like come up for air and then you realize I missed a whole year of my niece's life that I'm not going to get back. I'm happy to be where I am, but was it really worth it?
Mm,
And I think that there's a better balance that you can have,
yeah.
you know?
It it was worth it,
Mhm.
obviously, but there's, it could have been a little bit better. It could have been a little more balanced. If I
Yeah.
became a nurse practitioner next year, but
Mhm.
enjoyed the last 9, it still would have been worth it. That's what you're,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Because I had this pressure that I had to do it, I had to do it, I had to do it, meet the deadlines. I don't know what deadlines, I don't know what the rush was, but like I had to meet these deadlines, and then like I missed, that's like one example of me missing
Thousands.
things. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming on, sharing your story, for all the things you've talked about. Um, Everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.